Okay, guys, it's 16:30, so let's start with the last part. Sebastian has given you quite a bit of material to digest, all the changes in AiiDA, etc. This presentation is going to be much more practical and short. You have already received the link to the slides in the Slack channel, and this presentation has lots of links in it that then lets you basically follow up on all of the details on your own time. So I'm just going to walk through the steps here that we suggest to follow in order to migrate your plugin. And well, the zero step is actually to install AiiDA. So since we have been working a lot on AiiDA recently, and also during this plugin developer coding week, we are probably going to introduce some bug fixes. We suggest that all of you install directly from the develop branch on GitHub. Important to remember, if you install a reuse an existing clone, delete all the PYC files. Something else we noticed today is so there's still problems with pip 19. Before installing, maybe a downgrade to pip to 18.1. We'll see to fix this in the future. Remember the reentry scan, and if you've never done anything with AiiDA 1.0, also no alpha release, you will need to have a look at the docs on how to install RabbitMQ on your operating system. We have instructions for a number of operating systems. And finally, there's a new Verdi status command that you can do at the end, and if all services are green, then you're ready to go. So first, a few notes about versioning. In AiiDA, we now use semantic versioning. So if you version mainer version number dot minor version number dot patch version number, then what we're going to do in the future is, if we do bug fixes, we bump the patch version. If we introduce new features, we're going to bump the minor version. And if we make backward incompatible API changes, we bump the major version. And so a few suggestions for your plugin. If you now have any unreleased changes in your plugin, now would be a good time to make a new release. And then after this, bump the major version for adding AiiDA Core 1.0 support. I suggest you would start with something like an Alpha 1 version, so that people who are already using your plugin won't accidentally upgrade. Because if you do pip install your plugin name, by default, pip will not install alpha or beta versions. Then, at the moment, we don't suggest to try supporting both AiiDA Core 0.12 and AiiDA Core 1.0 in the same plugin. So I would say make this new plugin support for Python 2 and Python 3, but AiiDA Core 1.0 only. One of the reasons is that you will see over the course of plugin migration that you can drop quite a bit of code from your plugin in the 1.0 version. And if you try to support both versions, which is kind of possible, I guess, but which I don't recommend, you will have to maintain all of this code and maybe add extra. So yeah, make it a 1.0 plugin. And finally, just the lines that you will need to depend on AiiDA for your old version of the plugin here on AiiDA Core below 1.0, and for the new version of your plugin on AiiDA 1.0. Any questions at this point? Yes?
So, again, for the plugins, do you advise to secure the last release of AiiDA Core 0.12 and then move on the new development branch, so sort of not going back to this supporting AiiDA Core 0.12?
So I mean, it's certainly a good idea to keep a record of what the state that your plugin has now, and maybe to create a branch. So what we would usually do in the semantic versioning, you would then create from your current master branch a branch called support/0.12, something like this, or whatever the version of your plugin is, that you can keep around if you at some point you want to maybe make fixes to your plugin to the 0.12 version, so to your old plugin. But what I would suggest is that after you've released your current state of your plugin, you bump the major version number and then you go for 1.0 support. Okay. Python 2, Python 3 compatibility. As Oscar mentioned, one way to do it is using pre-commit hooks. So what you do for this is you add pre-commit-config.yaml file in just in the top level of your directory, and then you add something like this. So a pre-commit hook here that will then run over your code base whenever you commit. You then add a corresponding the dependencies you need for this. You can add in a, for example, in a pre-commit extra in your setup.py. Oops, what was this? Here we go. It will look hopefully something like this. Yeah, something like this. Again, the links are in the slides. And then what you do, you install the pre-commit extra, you install the pre-commit hook, and once you run it over all files, because by default the pre-commit hook will only run over the files that change from one commit to the next in order to be efficient. Next is the AiiDA plugin migrator. So on the wiki, if you follow this link, there's a very, very long list of backward incompatible changes. And we really wanted to avoid that everybody of us now has to do the same search and replace operations. So I wrote a small script called the AiiDA plugin migrator that will help you with at least some of these replacements. So just because we had this already today, if you get a parsing failed error, maybe first be sure to complete step 2, because the AiiDA plugin migrator itself runs on Python 3. So the idea would be you install this in some Python 3 environment. There doesn't need to be any AiiDA in it. It just needs to have this plugin migrator. It's also important to install the latest version of Bowler. So just follow these instructions here. And then you get to this AiiDA plugin migrator.py in the path, and you can simply run this on either your whole plugin code or just a single file of your plugin. Do it one by one. And it will ask you for every change that it makes whether you think that is right or not. Again, and the link to it is just here. Then migrating calculations. So this is simply the wiki that Sebastian already showed. It's called the AiiDA plugin migration guide. So migrating imports is taken care of hopefully mostly by the plugin migrator. There may be things that it doesn't catch. If it doesn't catch something, do it by hand, or maybe open a pull request so that at least the next people who are trying it will be able to use the plugin migrator. Then there's a small short section on migrating data subclasses where the constructor has changed a little bit. You may remember that there used to be these magic functions being called and we've moved to a more, say, standard Python interface. The details are explained here. Then there's a long section on how to migrate the job calculation to calcjob. I won't go into details here, so you can just go through all of this in your own time. And finally, there will be the migration of the parser. Again, we've tried to make it as self-explanatory as possible, and if we discover any issues, we will be updating this wiki with additional hints. And just as my last slide, here are some links to things that have already started. So as you can see here, there's no AiiDA 1.0 plugin yet, so yours might actually be the first. We are also just in the plugin in the process of migrating our plugins. For CP2K, for example, there's now a pull request, an open one. For AiiDA Code Tools, Sebastian started working in a branch, and for an example of migrating a calculation, you could look into this one. I started migrating the AiiDA 0++ plugin, but also this is not yet finished. So we are all kind of in the same boat. And that's it. So if you have any questions about the process of plugin migration, please ask now, and then afterwards you can already start migrating.
So just to summarize, I think first step would be to do Python 2, Python 3 compatibility. Because only then can you run the migrator, which will automatically do a lot of stuff. And then as a final step, you'll have to do some things manually, such as job calcs. That would be roughly the order of doing stuff.